What are the pros and cons of the digital SAT that you need to know? You know how you need to take one of these college admissions tests like the SAT or the ACT to apply to college? You have to sit down for a super long time and you can hardly get through it without losing focus and feeling totally bored, right? But the problem is, like, there's so much at stake. This test, it seems like it determines your whole future. So what are you gonna do? The new digital SAT is a considerably shorter test than it used to be, than the previous SAT was, and shorter than the ACT. It's 2 hours, 14 minutes all in versus over 3 hours for a regular time test taker. That's the first pro of the digital SAT, which is that it is a much shorter test as far as standardized tests go. What goes with this pro of it being such a shorter test? Well, it is able to accomplish that by being computer adaptive. So what that means is that the digital SAT is able to assess your skill level by asking you fewer questions and making the test shorter, but that means that it has a different format. And what it does is, in each section, in the reading, writing, and in the math, the first half of the questions will basically like assess your general initial skill. And then based on how well you do on that, it will either ask you an easier or a harder second half of the section. Yes, the con of this is that if you don't perform well in the first half of a section, you might be pegged at a easier section, second half of the section, and a lower score. So now you probably understand how important it is to do your best and answer accurately for all of those questions on the digital SAT. And especially in those first questions, like the first module of each section, it's super important. However, then we have an issue of, most of my students like hate several standardized tests before they start working with me because they feel like they don't have enough time. Luckily for you, on the digital SAT, there is significantly more time per test question. As an average for the whole test, you have about 82 seconds per question, 71 seconds per question in the reading, writing, and 95 seconds, which is over a minute and a half for each question in the math. So that is drastically more time than you get on the other test, on the ACT, because on that one you have between 36 and 60 seconds per question for a regular time test taker. However, with every pro, there is a con. So the pro of having more time per question for the digital SAT, it is coupled with the con of those questions are more nuanced and more sophisticated. They tend to ask things in maybe a more roundabout, convoluted way, and you really have to read carefully and read more, dense content to figure out what it's asking. So hey there, I'm Kristina of Ivy Lounge Test Prep. I help high schoolers all over the globe get into their dream colleges by helping them drastically raise their SAT and ACT test scores and helping them write compelling college application essays. So now I want to hear from you. Are you the type of student who takes his or her time but is all about those complicated, nuanced, sophisticated test questions? Are you more of a straight shooter and a speed demon? Or are you somewhere in between? So please answer me in the comments below. While you're at it, why don't you just like this video with a nice little thumbs up, and why don't you subscribe to our channel? Thank you so much. Has this ever happened to you? You're in the middle of a standardized test and you're in the reading section and you're reading a passage. You just don't understand what it's about. Like, your eyes went over the words and it's just not clicking. And unfortunately, that's pretty sucky, because if you don't understand what the passage says, how are you going to answer the 10 or 11 questions that are accompanying the passage? And then it's going to tank your section score, and then it's going to tank the whole test. You get it. It's a situation for some people. To solve this conundrum, the digital SAT has only discrete questions on the whole test, but this is especially relevant in the reading and writing section. What this means is that every question has its own text. The text is shorter. It's like maybe one paragraph, possibly a couple paragraphs. The good news is that if you don't understand what, say, question 17 is saying, right, and you just didn't understand the text and you get that question wrong, has no bearing at all on your ability to read and comprehend question 18 and get that question right. So that is pro number 3, is that on the reading section of the test, you have discrete questions, no more long passages that all your questions hinge upon. Every pro does come with a con, as I've mentioned. And even though these texts may be only one paragraph or two paragraphs, man, are they sophisticated and they can be nuanced. There is higher vocabulary in them. There are varied formats. There might be poetry as one of your texts. There's a lot of jumping around from talking about one person to talking about a totally different topic. For some students, that may be draining. The other thing is these texts may come from very different time periods. They're not modern, helpful, but friendly and accessible blog post style reads. You're in the middle of taking a standardized test. Instead of focusing on the system of linear equations problem that's right in front of you, all you can think about is, oh my God, how much time have I used up? I can't see the clock because it's behind me and it'll look like I'm cheating if I turn around. Is the proctor going to give me my 5-minute warning? Or did they forget? Do I have less than 5 minutes left? And instead of focusing on the question, you're totally doing a whole mental conversation about how much time you have left. It's going to tank your whole ability to focus. And when you get in that, downward rabbit hole, it's definitely going to tank your score. The digital SAT solves this problem. You are taking this test on their app. It is called the Blue Book app. It is installed on whatever device you were taking the test on, laptop, computer, tablet. And this device has the countdown clock right there. So you always know, you never have to wonder how much time you have left. So you never have to make your mind spin in that direction. So the app also does a couple other things, which is that you're allowed to flag a question, go back later. Like, so you can, if there's one that you don't really know, you don't waste time thinking about it, you can quickly find it again and go back to it later. You can underline text, you can annotate. There are many, many functions in the app. So that is the 4th pro of the digital SAT, which is that there's a countdown timer and you have abilities within the app to flag questions, annotate, underline. You have all sorts of bells and whistles. The con that goes with this pro is if you're one of those people who, in order to understand what you are reading on any question of the test, you like need to be moving your hand, like moving your pencil, like underlining, circling, writing notes. Like maybe you're a kinesthetic learner. This might not be great for you because you might actually do better if you actually had paper and pencil and could actually move your hand while you read. Are you the type of student who has trouble remembering your math formulas? Like you keep getting the ratios for the 30, 60, 90 special right triangle wrong, and then you end up missing questions, but like you knew how to do it, you just kind of forgot one of the key parts of the ratios. And you can't solve anything without a calculator. If this sounds like you will be happy to know that on the digital SAT, you have a reference table that you can access at any point. It's in the app. In addition, there's also a calculator in the app that you can use. And of course, if you want to use your own calculator because you're more comfortable with it, you can bring it as well, so long as it's one of the approved calculators for the digital SAT. The con to go with this pro is that if you're one of those students who love geometry, you happen to remember everything, it was your favorite class, like the shapes made sense to you, areas, perimeters, volumes. Unfortunately, the digital SAT doesn't really emphasize geometry so much. On the ACT, about 1/4 of that math section is geometry, but on the digital SAT, we're talking roughly 10%. Geometry and trig comprise 15% of the test, so geometry is about 10% of the total test. Another con to the math section that is related is, you get to use a calculator the whole time, but if you're one of those people who likes to back solve, you like to use the answer choices in your multiple choice question and figure out the answer that way, like not actually solve it. Unfortunately, on the digital SAT, about a fourth of the questions, roughly 11 questions in the math section, are self-produced. You have to come out with an answer completely on your own and type it in to the computer. So now that you've heard all the pros and cons of the digital SAT, let's knock it out of the park and get a 1600, right? Because won't a perfect score help you get into your dream college? To find out if a perfect SAT or ACT score will actually get you into the Ivy League, please watch this next video.